Mr. Topher Bates. Thank you, sir, for joining. First off, really appreciate it. Know you've helped out a lot in the past with P31, helping guys, either being a mentor or just a sounding board. Really appreciate how much you pour into other folks. Honored to have you here as a part of the speaker series. So really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pleasure and honor to be in this seat.
Absolutely. So wanted to start with just a quick intro, if you don't mind telling the people who you are, kind of a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm Topher Bates, live and work here in Manhattan, New York. Currently in the sports and entertainment industry, working for a company called TKO, which is essentially a conglomerate of different sports, media, and owned and operated leagues. Currently the chief of staff and senior director of business development to the president at one location, which is a VIP ticketing, premium hospitality, and exclusive sports experience business. Prior to that, I actually worked in financial services for a little over a decade before going to business school at Wharton, where I met you, to get put on this path and trajectory. Say beyond that, I'm a family man. I'm a lifelong athlete. I'm engaged, getting married later this year.
Congrats.
Thank you. Very grateful and fortunate with the way things have come together in my life.
Excellent. Want to start the conversation by talking about the grind. It's something that I think you and I have aligned on, bonded over, whether it's IRONMAN or just other, aspirations that we've pursued. You mentioned, you glazed over it, but I want to double click on the fact that you're not just any kind of athlete. You were a D1 athlete at one of the top football programs in the nation. And so can you talk a bit about, what the grind has meant to you, even maybe from a young age, going through, football trainings to, how that may have taken a different form in what you're doing now, the constants, how it's changed and what it's meant for you?
Sure. I'd say looking back, even when I was a child, being an athlete was a part of my identity. But I think in the beginning, what really attracted me to sports and competition and, physical activity was really an outlet to express myself. So, I didn't mention in my intro because I don't view it as who I am as a person, but I do come from very humble beginnings. Was born in the South, but went through my adolescent years in St. Louis, Missouri, in a very rough neighborhood, single mother, incarcerated father, a mother who was, God-fearing, faithful, persistent, taught me so much, and my siblings as well, about, how to treat people, how to live with character and honor, and how to stay focused and have a belief. But ultimately, we experienced a lot of challenges, and it was tough. It was hard not having, certain resources or support or a father figure at home. And so from the very beginning, I always viewed sports and just athletic competition as a way to channel my energy and my aggression into something that I could control. I couldn't control where I went to school, the dynamics of my household, if we had food in the house, if bills were paid, and your basic utilities were functioning. But if you put me on the field, I could control how fast I sprint, and I could feel progress and my dedication and my focus in showing up to whatever practice or thing I was participating in. Even so much at, before I was 10 years old, I got very enamored by the military and this idea of wanting to be a warrior and, maybe potentially become special forces one day. I remember being 10 years old, wanting to be a Navy SEAL, but I don't think it was really, the athletics of it or the actual combat of it all. It was more so just, I want to represent something that's bigger than myself, the teamwork, the community of people who overcome adversity and then excel to the benefit of others. And so, very young, having sisters, having a mother that was providing on her own, I wanted to be someone who could protect them, who could take care of them. And so just growing up in the neighborhood that I did, being athletic, being fit, that was a way to have protection and credibility in my neighborhood. So it just reinforced my commitment to want to double down on that, because I realized when I got muscles, when I started to perform athletically, I had less problems with people in the neighborhood. I had more respect, and I also had a lot more confidence, which was huge for my development at that point, because even though there was many other things missing, I think ultimately that's what gave me the confidence to pursue many other things where I could grow and develop and become a more well-rounded individual.
And I want to spend some time on the confidence concept, because it is so important to have that sense of self-confidence, self-worth in all stages of life, in all facets of life. Can you talk a bit about, where that confidence came from after football? If it started with football, working out, training, and that's where you got respect, and so the respect kind of, built your confidence, is kind of what I'm hearing from you. Maybe how did you maintain that confidence once sports were gone and you were looking to the next challenge?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, to take a step back, I'd say I think so much of who we are and how we perform and our identity really comes down to self-esteem. Self-esteem established at a very young age. And I personally think it starts with your parents. It starts with your community, with people saying, I believe in you, you're special, you have talent, you're worthy, you're capable. And whether you're hearing that from your parents, whether you're hearing that from coaches, whether you're hearing that from teachers, it's really, really important for you to understand that, you have the ability to solve problems, whether it's physically, whether it's intellectually. And so that has been something that I realized throughout my life, that in sports I've developed, but there were other areas in my life where I might not have had that same either example or enforcement. And so for me, sports it was a vehicle to put me on a certain path where I could have more exposures. And so for me, going to Purdue University was, when I got to campus there, I had locks all the way down my back. I had facial hair. And to be completely honest, I was on campus with a flag in my pocket, which was very common in the urban culture that I grew up in. I was a street dude, you know what I mean? On all accounts. But when I got to Purdue, I realized that, there was a very, very small population of student athletes. And I was, amazed at seeing the other ways that folks were approaching that opportunity to be on that campus, where I looked at it as, hey, I'm in college because I want to play football. Truthfully, without college football, I probably would have just gone into the military. But once I got on that campus and I started seeing other Black men like myself who were there for what they did academically, whether they wanted to pursue engineering or they were in the business school, I was impressed and motivated by seeing the way that they were navigating all the different resources and opportunities available on that campus that I wasn't aware of. So what do I mean? Internships, co-ops, being TAs, working with professors on different innovations and getting different certificates in entrepreneurship, or pursuing study abroad programs, joining fraternities, joining organizations. People were really developing their resume in ways that I didn't even realize existed. Going to career fairs, thinking about things that they could control in regard to their effort and to their focus and dedication. And for me, with football, I realized that there's only so much you can control. You can't necessarily control who your coach is. You can't control who the quarterback is. You can't control how the line is blocking or how many times you get thrown the ball. You can do everything in your power to have the right attitude and position yourself in the best possible way to, make an impact on the team and get playing time. But fundamentally, I realized that my return on investment with athletics was low, and there was a major gap in my capability and my effort in other areas of my life, academically, socially, spiritually, and just character. I realized that in many ways, football had enabled me to develop many bad habits and get away with things that most people wouldn't get away with, like, sleeping in class in high school, going to a high school that's 20K plus a year in the early 2000s and sleeping through classes because I was a star athlete. I could get away with those things. And When you're young, you feel like you're getting a pass and you feel like you don't need it. And then down the road, when you grow and you evolve and you think about different goals, you realize you're far behind because you missed those reps and you're now trying to close that gap. And so when I thought about my character, when I thought about the things that I was in control of, I realized that while I played football, I had a victim mentality. And once I realized that from really hitting my head against the wall, going through a bit of hard knocks, I know there's the show, but I really lived it, I lived Last Chance U. I lived that show. So having certain experiences really helped me refocus and made me realize like you're much more than a football player. And if you put the same energy and focus into other areas of your life and you stop blaming other people for why you don't have the outcome or the results you want, then maybe you can really reach your full potential. And I think that's when things really started to shift at Purdue on that campus, realizing that if you keep doing the same thing and you keep getting the same results, that's the definition of insanity. So that's when I really started to change my ways.
I think that lots of folks would see that challenge and shy away from it or almost cower, against it, looking at something as daunting as, you show up to a campus, and even, folks call it imposter syndrome, folks call it just insecurity, but when you show up to a campus and you're good at this one thing and you see other people good at this other thing that you determine is important, I think some folks, again, will look at that and say, okay, how can I get started? Even if I'm starting from, stage 1 and I need to get to stage 10 very quickly, I'll just get started at stage 1. Other folks will say, man, that mountain looks really tall, not even worth me trying to climb it. What do you think was the distinguishing factor between you kind of running hard at that and just saying, I'm going to try to run through that wall, versus you looking at that and saying, man, I'm showing up late to the party, this may not even work out for me?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like a lot of it just comes down to mentality and belief. And I feel like, growing up in a household where faith was so important to how we were raised. And, my mother is one of the most positive, optimistic people in the world. She's always going to encourage me to go the extra mile, to show up. She's been a very dedicated and loving parent, and the rest of my family as well. I've been very fortunate with my grandparents and my uncles and aunts and that support in that community. We've always had faith. We've always seen miracles happen in our household because we had to depend on, God and others to help us make a way when we couldn't have a way. So we kind of always grew up believing that we were, beyond, and we were bigger than our circumstances. And my mother always reinforced that to us, that, where we are today is no representation of where we can go. And just really always encouraged us to think that anything was possible. And it sounds corny, but that definitely was a foundation. And it was not just in this, like there's a lot of things that I thought I could do, probably irrationally, but a lot of it just came from that deep, self-esteem and belief that was instilled at an early age. I think beyond that, I would say my older siblings, my older brother and my older sister, just knocked it out of the park, and they made a lot of sacrifices. They were both tremendous athletes and put all of their focus and attention on the books because they realized, coming where we came from, they wanted to be in a position to control their destiny. And they knew if they did certain things that they could get academic scholarships, that they would get certain internships, that they would be competitive. And so they went on to go get MBAs. The day before I graduated from Purdue University, my older brother graduated with his MBA from Duke and then started his career at McKinsey. And now, he's been there 14 years and is a partner, on the cusp of being a senior partner. So I say these things to say, like, it's not me, it's a community, it's a village of people who instilled certain values and belief systems in me, and then me being fortunate to watch other people do things that I might not necessarily had valued or followed at an earlier age, but I said, hey, that's my same blood. My older sister's got, MBA, master's, PhD. My older siblings are doing these things that lets me know I'm capable of also doing those things. So I think it's a combination of, community and example. I'm a firm believer in that you can't be what you can't see. And so having those exposures let me realize, already having the mentality, it's never too late. You can always turn things around. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And so those little thoughts and beliefs really made an impact.
That's excellent. And I love what you said about being able to see certain things. And it sounds like this is a concept that we talk a lot about in the mentorship program, which is the 5 people closest to you. The fact that you have to have people around you who are doing positive things, who are pushing you in the right direction, who are challenging you to believe beyond your current circumstances. It sounds like you had that in family. And I just think it's very important to find, if it's not family, it needs to be friends. It needs to be, mentors. I think, the fact that we're here making an effort to try to mentor others, I think speaks to the fact that you likely would agree with that. But I'm glad you touched on it, because I think it's very important.
I'm a martial artist. Been doing martial arts my whole life, boxing, wrestling, karate, taekwondo, all of that stuff. But there's a saying in the martial arts world that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I think you also have to be intentional about finding that community, that birds of a feather flock together. If you want to be a better student, then you need to hang out at the library. If you want to be a better athlete, then you need to hang out at the gym. If you want to be a great, hairstylist, you need to be at the barbershop. Like, you need to put yourself in a position to be immersed and surrounded by people who are doing things that you want to do. And that's what's going to put you on that trajectory. When I got my first summer internship that changed my whole trajectory, my whole career at Purdue, it's because I identified a certain community of men on campus, Black men, who were excelling and achieving, and they were in a fraternity. After I joined that fraternity, I got that internship. And guess what? All of those brothers had internships at JP Morgan, at Bank of America, at Boeing, at big brands where they were getting paid over the summer and having corporate housing and, getting all different types of professional development while they were still in undergrad and still in school, and they were becoming RAs. And so, you have to recognize that you have a gap, and then you have to go outside of your way, outside of your comfort zone, to do something and to put yourself in a different environment. Because, when I was at Purdue, and I'm sure it's the same at most universities, being on a football team is a frat. But I recognized while I was on that team that all of us were kind of on the same playbook, and a lot of those guys after college weren't on the path that I wanted to be on. So, I think all throughout your life, you have to seek out those communities and those people, because yes, my older siblings were an example, but my older brother's almost 8 years older than me. My older sister's almost 5 years older than me. So I didn't spend a lot of time with them. I just knew that, hey, this is what I'm capable of. My mother worked really hard. She's about to get her PhD, and she's in her mid-60s. And as long as I've been alive, she's been going to school and back to school to continuously grow and excel. So she's been a wonderful mother, but she wasn't, a titan of industry by any means. I have continuously had to, seek out mentors and try to go find people who I could emulate and learn from. And I think that it's your responsibility to become the best version of yourself. And I'll say throughout my journey, I've lost a lot of friends. I've made a lot of friends, but it's usually because I am putting myself in new communities that are going to help me get to the next level. And that's okay. That's a part of growth.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that discernment that you described? Being in a place, recognizing that the person to your left, person to your right, not inspiring, or at least not trying to lead a similar life, not pushing themselves to achieve the same goals. Can you talk about, is that tough for you? Is it easy for you to change direction, to kind of cut folks off? What does the process look like? And maybe any tools you have for folks who find themselves in a position where, you know, a lot of their friends aren't, you know, as ambitious as they would like to be, and they kind of want to shift course as well.
Yeah, man. I'm about to say something I've never said before. I think a lot of people don't accomplish their goals and dreams because they're too loyal to people who don't have the same goals and dreams. Whoa, dude. I'm like, I gotta unpack that. Like, a lot of people don't reach their goals and dreams because they're too loyal to people who don't have the same goals and dreams. That doesn't mean that you can't still have friendships and still have bonds. But at some point or another, you have to say, hey, this is my calling. This is my purpose. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm passionate about. And it's going to be uncomfortable at some time to take that risk, to move to that new city, to go to that new community, to immerse yourself with people who you don't know, to start something that you don't know how to do, start a new language, learn how to play a new instrument. Like, it's not going to be easy to break away from people who you've been building with or you've grown with or you have experiences with, but you can't stay in the same environment with the same people if they don't want to achieve and pursue the same things as you and also reach those things. It's very, very difficult. And so I've made a lot of those tough calls throughout my life. And to be honest with you, I feel like football helped me learn that because, you know, I was very competitive in high school. I missed a lot of family reunions in the summers because I was at camps recruiting. You know, I've always had focus. You know, I was in high school. I wanted to go D1. I was in middle school. I wanted to go D1. So at an early age, I was sacrificing, you know, friends, family to get on a path to get to where I wanted to go. So I feel like in the back of my mind, that's always kind of been there, that like, you know, elevation comes with separation. You have to be willing to, you know, go into the darkness, go underground, as my mom would always say to me. She's like, you go underground, you disappear. Like, I've had years, Ross, no exaggeration, where I text no one back. No, when I was trying to get into business school, no cap, and I couldn't get my GMAT where I wanted to, that's a whole nother story. I increased my GMAT 260 points officially through the grind. But I literally went about 16 months where I didn't text or call anyone back. I didn't check social media one time. I was so focused and locked in on trying to get my GMAT score up and focusing on GMAT and work that pretty much nothing, I would not allow anything to get into the way. And I've always got that way when I get locked on a goal, you know, and it's necessary, but it's difficult. And, you know, I think it's very, very hard over the years when you keep grinding and climbing. Snoop Dogg has a video where he's talking, I think, A$AP Rocky about this, about how, you know, the more you grow, the bigger the gap comes with the people that you love. And I think in an ideal world, you want to take these people with you, or you don't always have to have the same goals or dreams with people, but they have to have goals and dreams. If they don't, then the gap goes. So two people, one person can want to be a chef or a hairstylist, one person can want to be a corporate executive or a pro athlete. But as long as, you know, you are both trying to ascend and grow, then you can maintain that relationship. But if the other person settles, if they don't keep exploring and learning and developing, then that gap is going to continue to grow. And you can try to encourage people, but you can't force people to make certain moves. And I've been very guilty of wanting people's dreams and goals that they had to come true more than they wanted to come true. I can't tell you how many times I try to help people manifest their goals and their dreams, but you can't do that. You can give them all the resources in the world, but you can't make them do the work or have the confidence or show up or believe or network or do the day-to-day campaigning required to achieve that objective. And that is very sad because I feel like over the years, I've seen a lot of people not reach their full potential at many levels. And I try to tell them 1,000 times they should do it. And they didn't listen. And so most of those people I don't really have relationships with. But the people who did level up and pursue whatever their calling was, you know, we're tighter than ever. And I think it goes with siblings as well. It goes with siblings, it goes with parents, it goes with your significant other. You have to be growing together. And there's only so much you can, your opportunity to grow will be limited if you continue to put yourself around people who don't want to grow anymore. And that doesn't make them bad people.
What I'm hearing too, so to address the first part of what you said, you were talking about how, and even bits of the second part too, is, as you talk about going underground, and as you talk about recognizing that when folks aren't for you, you need to separate yourself. I feel like there's almost this prerequisite to be comfortable being alone in order to find your tribe or your circle. I think that, and it's connected. It's impossible to disconnect the comfort with being alone to the self-esteem piece that we were talking about earlier and the self-confidence. I think, if you don't like yourself, and if you get in a room and it gets quiet and you get uncomfortable, I feel like that's a sure sign that there's something wrong with you and you need to work on you before you can be a good friend, mentor, colleague, all the above. Now, I think some of the best periods of my life, and some of the periods of my life where I've experienced the most growth, have been those periods of loneliness. And I shouldn't call it loneliness.
Like geographically, when you're in a different part of the country, when you're...
Isolation.
Isolation.
Yeah, I shouldn't call it loneliness. Isolation. We talked a lot about IRONMAN training in business school, and how when I was training, I wasn't really going to the parties. I was waking up early most of the time. Meeting up with you so we can hit the pool, right? Or go for runs, and there are things you sacrifice in order to accomplish goals, and usually I think the sacrifices end up sort of surgically removing some of those, not only activities, but some of those people as well that would otherwise be kind of latching on. And I don't think I would have been able to do any of that if I didn't have confidence in self, as well as confidence in the goal. What you describe as, when you were discussing, working on the GMAT and grinding on the GMAT, I think the only way you get through that is if you are passionate and convicted about the goal that you have. Can you talk a bit about, the importance of passion and conviction when you're pursuing something? I have my thoughts, but want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I recently was just listening to this interview with the president and COO of TKO, Mark Shapiro, who's, the head honcho, runs my company, my boss's boss. And, he talked about how, there's going to be people who are going to be smarter than you. There's going to be people who are more talented than you, but no one can outpassion you. No one can outpassion you. It's not something that you can compete with, right? Like, if you really love something, if you really care about it, that is unique. That is distinctive. That is a premium resource, because you can't manufacture passion, right? Like, if you really have that burning desire, Napoleon Hill says in one of my favorite authors, and, the author of Think and Grow Rich and many other great books, but he says, desire is the starting point of all achievement. And, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I'd say I truly believe that passion is a gift from God. I truly do. I really believe it. Some people are just born with it in their heart and their soul. They want to be the best that they can be. They want to grow. They want to learn. They want to adventure. It's not in everyone. It's not in everyone. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person, but, we all have different talents. We all have different strengths. And I think that passion is something that is so important, and we should be mindful of the things that we're passionate about, and we should lean into those things and nurture those things and cultivate those things, whether it's for fun, whether it's professionally, whether it's because we want to develop in it, or it's just an interest, right? Like, if you wake up every morning and you think about fishing, and you're listening to podcasts about fishing, and when you get an extra couple bucks, you're thinking about how you can spend it on something related to fishing. There's something there with you and fishing. You should lean into that. You should, nurture it. You should, pour into that. And so, passion is something that I think comes from within. And many times I think it comes from God and putting that inside of us. But I think it's also our job to be mindful of the things we're passionate about, and then be thoughtful around, how do I commercialize this?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do I help you with this?
Yeah.
How can I scale this? How can I take this passion and go out there and make the world a better place?
I mean, and you mentioned fishing, but and maybe as a funny example, but I mean, look at Cam Hanes, for example.
Who's Cam Hanes?
Very passionate about bow hunting. He's a bow hunter who was spending all of his time and energy focusing on bow hunting, and he ended up commercializing it by manufacturing his own arrows, his own bows. But he became a brand in and of himself because he was showing up to all these competitions, winning because no one else was really pursuing this passion of bow hunting. And he talks about the sacrifices he made and where it led him. It became an obsession to the point where he was no longer just thinking about target practice. He was thinking, I need to get my endurance up so that I can, hold my breath for longer so I can take that perfect shot. So he started running. He became an ultra runner, all tied back to bow hunting. He's of the same contingent of, David Goggins and the Joe Rogans. Like, he hangs out with those guys. I mean, the passion and the intensity, regardless of what it's for, to your point, I think is more important than where you're directing it almost. Can you talk about, I have my thoughts too, but I want you to talk about, for folks who feel like they're not really passionate about anything or they haven't found that thing, are there recommendations or suggestions or tools even that you would give for folks who are trying to find that passion?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to kind of repeat what I've heard and what I've seen. David Goggins once said it, but it's like the first thing you need to do is stop listening to everyone else. We are animals. We are very much monkey see, monkey do. We saw that at Wharton. We saw that at business school. We see that in high school. Everybody wants to go to PE, so everyone goes to PE. Everybody wants to go into consulting, so everyone goes in consulting. A lot of us don't know who we are because we're too busy downloading who everyone else is. Now, granted, you can go out there and go learn who you want to be and go find that content. And that's the beautiful thing about these platforms, right? Like, you can go out there and be intentional. You can learn anything you want to on YouTube right now. Anything. So go find the stuff you want to be passionate about. But I think a lot of times we're not intentional and we're not mindful of the influences of those 5 people around us. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, I'm telling you, man, I've seen this a lot with me and with other people. We truly become the people we hang around. If you hang around a bunch of dudes who want to be the best fathers in the world and be married, you're going to want to be a father and be married. If you hang out with dudes who just want to go to the club and bounce around and be passport bros, you're going to want to be on a passport bro. So a lot of times our desires are also coming from the music that we listen to, the movies that we listen to, the things that we're consuming that we're not being cognizant of how it's impacting us subconsciously or consciously. It's the same reason why people say, hey, once you get into a relationship, you need to be thoughtful of the people that you're spending time with, because they're going to be the ones to reinforce what's normal. And I think that's true for, commitment as well. And I think it's so important why you have to have isolation to achieve certain goals, because if I look back on now what I did to, get into Wharton, and I'm like, I used to drink coffee at 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, any day that ended with Y, and go to work the next day after staying up till 4 in the morning to study. That's not normal. Who does that? Who does an Ironman? Like, who does the things that we do? If you hang around people who are like, oh, that's so hard. You don't need to work so hard. That's really scary. Like, then you're going to be scared. Then you're going to think that you don't need to push yourself. But if you hang around a bunch of savages, then you're going to be like, this is an easy day at work. It's the same way as I look at the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon. It's like, oh, I could cry about a half-mile swim in the bay, or I could think about how Navy SEALs are made in that same water 4 times a year. I didn't ever go after that dream or goal, but I sure as hell can get out that water on one day. Easy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's all back to the mentality and the people that we're around and the people that we're who are reinforcing different beliefs. So I just say go back to trying to find your passion. You have to cut out the noise. You have to spend some time alone. You have to spend some time with a pen and a paper, writing down your goals, who you want to be. I asked my fiance not long ago on her birthday, I said, what are your wildest dreams? We had to, and I'm like, let's just talk about all your wildest dreams. Like, what are the craziest things that you would ever want to happen You know, a lot of times people never spend the time to think about that. They never think about the best ideal situation that could ever come to them because they don't think it's possible or they're not seeing it on a day to day. But once you have those exposures and that becomes normal, then you're like, oh, wow, I can have these things or be this person or learn that particular skill. It's not too late for me to become fluent in French and Spanish or learn how to play the piano. But all of that has to come down to exposures. And I think all of it, again, comes back down to what we're consuming and then also taking the time to be alone so we can hear our own thoughts. So maybe it's meditating. Maybe it's just walking in silence. Don't always be plugged in. You know, one of the reasons why I love the pool is because there's no distractions. There's no screens. There's no conversations. There's just action and motion. Action, motion, and reflection. That's it. There's nothing else that can distract you. And that's hard. And sometimes I feel like I'm more scared of that isolation and that silence than I am of actually swimming. A lot of times I'm not actually tired in the pool. I'm just tired of having to be so focused and quiet because that's when I hear all the truth come out about all the things in my life I need to fix. So we have to, you know, spend time alone and we have to be mindful of what we're consuming.
Yeah, I love that you touched on the silence piece. That is one thing that I took away from Ironman that I was not expecting to get. So when I first started running, I had my running playlist, I worked up to a marathon. Even during my first marathon, I was still listening to music. And once I decided to pursue Ironman, I cut out all the music when I was running, and I found it to be a completely different experience. Meditative, but you also learn so much about who you are in the best situations and the worst situations. I mean, you know, running that fourth mile when the third was tough and there's no, you know, whoever you want to have in your ear yelling at you, you know, or music. Yeah, exactly. There's no beat. Like, it hits very different. It feels very different. And you learn who you are in that moment too. I think what I learned as well is how to motivate myself in those moments. And just thinking about, you know, the lessons you can take from the physical and apply it to the intellectual or apply it to work or, you know, whatever. Learning how to motivate yourself, I think, is so incredibly important.
Did you notice a difference in your performance when you stopped using music?
Yes.
How so?
Yeah. Well, I noticed, so yes, in workouts over time, in that working out without music got easier, but where I really noticed a difference was my focus in other areas of my life. In work, so at the time, business school, schoolwork, in the ease and the ability to say no got so much easier. My conviction in self got so much easier. It was easier for me to have tough conversations with folks or to, I just think the strength of self got so much stronger. And again, it came back to learning about who I was in those tough moments and learning about literally, and learning about how I could react, how I could observe myself reacting and how I could change course. It was recognizing that I had control over my body and I had control over my feelings. I had control over all of the voices in my head. It was just as easy to turn those off after a point as it was to listen to them and have them influence how I was acting. That was the biggest takeaway. That's why I always,
You still don't listen to music when you work out?
No. So at least when I run. I have started listening to music when I lift. But yeah, running, still don't listen to music. I love the pool for that exact reason. And it's also, in the pool, it's even to a heightened degree because you're not getting city sounds, you're not getting people yelling or talking. It is literally hearing bubbles, hearing your breath. It is just the ultimate isolation, being in a tank. And you talk to, it resonated so much with me when you're talking about those voices flooding into your head. You learn about what's, sometimes, and we can talk about maybe anxiety for a bit or how you handle stress, because I think that's important too to discuss. But I found myself sometimes, and still do, find myself feeling a bit anxious occasionally and not really being able to identify a root cause. And I think when I get in those quiet spaces, to your point about like thoughts flooding into your head, I've learned to observe what thoughts constantly occur, and I can then diagnose some of those anxious feelings. And so it's become a tool that I use often, not just on the workout front. How can I, sharpen my mind when I'm doing these physical activities, but also, how can I apply this to life?
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Man, there's so much that you said that really resonates. The one thing that you said that really I'm thinking about more, because I have lately, been running, training. I have been listening to music, not all the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, especially with a full day of workouts, you get overstimulated with all that sound and that content, and it drains you.
Yeah.
And I've even had times where I notice when I don't have music, I run faster because all I'm thinking about is running, as opposed to the tempo of the beat or the energy or the tone. But getting back to what you said, I think it's so important is that you're out on those runs, you're having tough conversations with yourself. You're controlling your mind. You're controlling the dialogue. You're controlling your thoughts, how you respond to those thoughts, and pushing yourself to focus, to stay present, to continue to move forward. Then you can have tough conversations with others because you've had tough conversations with yourself. It's hard to have tough conversations with other people if you can't do it with yourself. So you that really was deep.
Can you say that again?
It's hard to have tough conversations with others if you haven't had tough conversations with yourself. And that's what you said, that it really hit home, because I'm like, man, that's true. Because how many people do we know who didn't go for a workout because their earbuds were dead? Or waited 45 minutes to go for a run they could have banged out because they wanted to charge up their headphones or charge up their phone. It's incredibly how much more disciplined we can be where we're not dependent on all these other motivating factors. So, yeah, I appreciate that. That's the things that people get so scared of when they hear about an Ironman. They're like, no music?
Yep.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember when you wrote down all the songs in your head?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Man, that was crazy.
Man, just a quick. I'll do it just a quick. So, yeah, man. For folks who don't know about Ironman in general, so you have you have to be self-sustaining to the extent that you have all of your nutrition at the beginning. No one else can bring you anything. No one else can help you along the route. And they have these stop-off points where you can refuel. But again, these are bags that you packed that are then waiting for you. You can't have folks helping you along the way. And so on the bike is, if you're Topher, it's 5 hours. If you're me, it's 6, 7. But
it's 112 miles.
Yeah. There you go. There you said better. It's 112 miles. And so you have how I did it was I had nutrition packed into 2 water bottles at a time, and then I had 2 water bottles waiting for me at the next aid station. And so I intentionally got water bottles without designs on them so that I could write on them things I wanted to reflect on as I biked. And when you're out there for so long in silence again, I began to take advantage of the fact that you do have control over your mind and you can control the thoughts you want to have. I also use it as a beautiful space to meditate on things that I otherwise wouldn't spend as much time thinking about during the day. Just day to day, you're focused on other stuff. And these sort of big picture thoughts or ideas, things like, who do I want to be? Or who do I feel like I can be? And how does that align with who I want to be? Just checking in with myself constantly. And so I wrote sort of those questions, those motivational quotes. One of my favorites, actually, I'll share this because we were in the start line together when I first heard this. We were at the start line of Placid, and there was a woman standing next to us. She was an older woman. She'd clearly done them before. And unsolicited advice, but some of the best advice I've gotten, and I always tell folks this now. She was like, first time, and I said, yeah, I think she could tell it was my first time, but she was like, first time? I was like, yeah. And she said, if I can tell you anything, It's that, this is a long race, it's a long day. Focus on the next 5 minutes. She said the moment you go beyond the next 5 minutes, you begin to get overwhelmed. You lose focus on what you're doing right now. One misstep leads to another misstep. She said focus on the next 5 minutes. And so what an incredible lesson. That was on my water bottle at Arizona when I did Arizona. But on the water bottle, I had motivational quotes, but I also had a playlist of music.
Let's go.
And these were songs that I knew really well just from growing up. I had some Stevie Wonder, I had whatever. And so I'd play a game with myself where, I'd take a drink and I'd look at my playlist and I'd press and I'd touch a song and I'd put it back and I'd play it in my head. And I think you get so mentally sharp and acute at being present and being able to recall, because you probably do the same. Just throughout, you're rehearsing your nutrition plan, you're rehearsing your heart rate and where you should be by certain times at certain mileage, and so you get so good at recalling things that I would hit. I'd press a song. And then immediately my mind would start to play that song in my head. And so it was almost as if I had headphones, frankly, at some points of the race. But just I loved the experience, man. I will always geek out on Ironman stories. I don't know if you have some Ironman stories you want to share.
Man, I love that mental resilience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that think about that mindset too, of that focus of being able to say in their head, I know that this is going to be hard. So before I get here, let me get my mantras, let me get my songs, let me get my playlist, let me get my thoughts organized. I don't think a lot of us think about life in that way. Every day is a long day, but how many of us would say, let me get all my thoughts organized? That's deep. That's deep. That transfers to other things.
Wow.
It's something that hearing you talk about it makes it so much real, but if you take a step back and you think about it, it's extraordinary. You know what I mean?
It is. Wow. Can we talk about, because one of my favorite Ironman stories I think aligns with maybe one of your favorites, which is this concept of failure. So I'm happy to share my story, but I don't know if you want to go first, and kind of, how you may have experienced failure in the Ironman arena, how you responded, what the next steps were, and how that maybe impacted,
Yeah. So going back to, again, from an early age, I remember when Ironman used to be on TV as a kid. I remember, grew up in the inner city, but they had the DSEG program in St. Louis, and they would literally ship kids in the inner city out to the suburbs for a better education. So you take these long bus rides that require getting up early in the morning. This was before I ended up going to a private high school, still in the suburbs, a far commute. But I did go to public schools at one point. And when I did, I would go out to these really affluent neighborhoods with, families with two parents and resources. And I remember one of my childhood friends, his name was William McDonald. His dad was a Navy SEAL. Both of his parents were dentists, very, very successful. Had a German Shepherd named Seal. That dog was scary. The dog was a seal. But I remember his dad was an Ironman, and I just remember being a kid sometimes going school field trips, whatever, and spend the night at his house on the weekdays just because of the ease of getting around. It'd be easier for my mom and family. So I spent a lot of time with them. And so from a young age, I always saw Ironman, and I knew that it was elite. Just like I knew being a SEAL was elite. And again, it was a far distant memory. I didn't live with the McDonald's. I just got exposed to it. They were a friend. But I say all that to say, I always had a goal of doing the Ironman ever since I saw it on TV. I thought it was terrifying, especially a black kid growing up in the hood. Like, William had a pool and I used to swim in it, but William was such a good swimmer. He was such a good runner. And I was fast at top speed, but I wasn't running miles as a young kid or swimming laps. So I didn't have that much water competency or confidence. And I just remember playing diving games in his backyard, and it was just a different experience being at his house. But I say all that to say I always wanted to be an Ironman. Always. I talked about it when I was an undergrad. I was like, one day I'm going to be an Ironman. didn't have a bike, didn't really know how to swim. I just thought I was going to be hard and I was going to do it and it was going to be flex. You know the motto, swim 2.4 miles, bike 112 miles, run a marathon and brag about it for the rest of your life. Like I wanted that. And so, you know, I moved to Cincinnati in Ohio for work. My company had acquired an office. I went out there as the young talent to transfer best practices, try to, you know, grow my market presence, get experience. And of course, first thing I did when I got to Cincinnati, literally the first day was go to LA Fitness and get a membership. The first day, I'm like, let me find the gym, join the 5 a.m. club. At this point, I'm just trying to get swole. I hadn't ran in years. Like literally probably hadn't ran since Purdue football. I was not in cardio shape. Really ripped up, very fit, but just all weights. Early in the morning, weights every day. So I always had that commitment to fitness. Anyways, talk about birds of a feather. One morning I'm in there and I'd always see these guys with IRONMAN tattoos and IRONMAN bags. And they would come in and they'd be drenched in sweat. They clearly were running before the gym opened. They'd be hitting the pool. They'd be hitting the bike. And so I would see them in the locker room. I see them from time to time. And they saw me as this young, hungry savage in the gym early, young black kid. And they could tell that like I was special just because of my dedication and my focus. They were curious about me. I was curious about them. So we started, you know, having light banter, light conversation. Anyways, one day I see them coming in out of the locker room on a random day. And I was like, I'm going to do one of those one day. And, you know, dude was like, bullshit, you ain't about to do that. And I'm like, no, I am. I'm going to be an Ironman one day. They're like, talk is cheap. You don't really want to be an Ironman. I'm like, yeah, dude. They're like, when? I was like, at some point, I'm going to do it. Like, just confident talking. They're like, man, this is for real men. You got to earn this MDOT. Like, this is for real savages. I don't know if you're there. And I'm like, man, I can do anything. And so they're like, okay, if you're really serious about an Ironman, hit us up. I was like, bet. And honestly, at the time, I was just talking trash. Like, I was the type of athlete who talked on the field. Like, I gave it a lot. I grew up in the inner city of St. Louis. It's the Show Me State. It was a fighting city. Like, I wasn't being confrontational because I had beef. It was just like, man, I'm going to do that. That ain't nothing. And they gave it right back to me. So one of the guys said, like, hey, if you're really serious, email me. So he didn't even give me his phone number. He gave me his email on a little piece of paper. Long story short, I emailed him. All these guys are Ironman, marathon streakers. I mean, elite dudes, executives, 40s, late 40s, early 50s, early 60s. Like, these are elite older white men, alpha males, you know, D1 football players at UCLA, linebacker, you know, D1 at this school, University of Cincinnati, former defensive back. Like, these are fit, athletic, successful, white entrepreneurial males who clearly have their ducks together, clearly are tight. And I'm seeing that network. I'm seeing that community. I'm like, yo, I'm going to be a part of that. And they're like, you ain't really serious. If you are, hit me up. So guy gives me his email. I end up following up. That turns into me going on my first ever 6-mile run. They go for 8. I go for 6. Bro, they killed me. It was February 2016, man. February 2016, first time. I had on like Nikes. Like, dude, first thing they told me is all shoes are not equal. You need some real running shoes. Fast forward, within 4 months of meeting them, I signed up for my first half Ironman, for my first triathlon ever. Because I hung out with these guys. I done gone on that 6-mile run. That done turned into 3 runs a week. That then turns in, hey, let's go take you to go get a bike. These guys helped me get a bike. I'm riding my bike with them. So I start training with them. I'm hitting the pool with them. And slowly, I'm becoming a part of this community. They all signed up for this half Ironman. It was 5 of us, 4 of them, you know, and just me. Obviously, I'm the only black dude. I remember this half Ironman. There's not a lot of black people out there at all. I could literally count on 2 hands all the black people out of 2,000 participants.
Yep.
You know, black people historically have struggled in the water and not have had as much confidence or exposure. But everyone's saying, hey, you're going to be good. You're going to be fine. I'm super, super fit at this point. I'm new to the sport. I've only been doing it 4 months. My first triathlon was a half Ironman, and it was my first open water swim. But I'm like, hey, I'm hard. You know, I can deal with contact. I'm a physical guy. I'm fit. So my first mistake that I make is, well, it was a hot day that summer. It was July 9th, 2016. I'll never forget it. It was not wetsuit legal. So it's a 1.2 mile swim and they're saying no wetsuit. So immediately I'm like, okay, this is a bit scary now because wetsuits help with buoyancy. I haven't done a lot of open water swimming. So now I'm like, okay, this is getting real. You can't wear your wetsuit, or if you do, you have to go at the very end. I saw all the black people decide, nope, we're doing wetsuit, we're coming in the last wave. So the difference in this particular race was getting in the water basically an hour earlier or waiting an hour. And I'm like, I don't want to wait an hour to get in the water and start at the end, end at the end. I want to be at the beginning. I want to be in the front. I want to be, I want to get this started. My guys are starting early. They're fine without a wetsuit. I want to do it too. So I have the confidence. So I'm nervous, but I'm honestly pretty confident. Truly, I prayed. I should be straight, right? Second mistake that I made. First was not wearing the wetsuit and being patient and getting to the back. Second mistake I make is they had all the guys, I was 26 at the time, and they had all the guys who were like young age and fit at the front. So out of 2,000 participants, I'm literally, no cap, Ross, I'm starting in the top 20, top 30, no wetsuits. I got 2,000 people bugging laughing. Of course, I'm the only black dude out there. I look good. I look really good with my tri-kit on. I was going to go swim in the tri-kit and just get right on the bike. I look good, but better than I do now. I was really still muscular too, bro. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to be straight. Man, 500 meters out, I realized I was in for a rude awakening. 700 meters out, when it was time for the first turn, I literally had 100 people swimming on top of me, kicking me, hitting me, had a panic attack, ended up getting pulled out the water, DNF, did not finish, got pulled out of the race. At that particular race, if you got pulled out, they would, they wouldn't allow you to go to the bike or the transition area. You couldn't be a part of it. So I had to just sit there wet, for the whole day and watch all my friends, all the participants finish. And I was heartbroken. My mother had came up, I was crying, I was defeated. And I remember being in her car. She's like, you're tougher than this. You're harder than this. You've been through everything. You can bounce back. This is okay. This was voluntary. Nobody made you do it. It's your first one. You're going to bounce back. You're going to rally. And all I was thinking in the back of my mind is like, I want my leg back. Like, I want revenge. I'm going home. Like, I got a plan. And I was devastated. I had told everyone online I was doing it. I had tried to raise awareness and raise money for people. So I had a cause behind it. And I brought all this unnecessary attention to it by calling all my loved ones before the race and trying to get motivation and just had so much pressure on myself to do well for all these other people because I thought that it mattered. And then I didn't. I was very embarrassed. And I had to just tell everyone at the time, I was like, hey, I got kicked in the head. I wasn't really prepared. But really, I just wasn't prepared. Getting kicked in the head is a part of it. That's like playing football and being mad at contact. So fast forward for me, no cap. The day was a half Ironman, so you still had your day back. I drove back to Cincinnati where I was living at the time after the race. And I was sad too because my mom had to drive all the way back to St. Louis where her son didn't finish, but she was fine. But anyways, as soon as I got home, the whole time I was just like, I'm going to find a coach. I was calling my brother. I called all my siblings on the way home, driving through the middle of nowhere, Indiana. And I'm just telling them I'm playing. I'm like, I'm going to find a coach. Like, I'm going to figure this out. I literally spent the whole night on the internet trying to find a coach, trying to find somebody who can help me. Ultimately, I found all these online programs, and I'm like, they're trying to say, I'm like, I can't swim. Because I like regressed after it. I was like, I need somebody who can watch me, who can coach me up. I need hands-on coaching. And I'd gone down a rabbit hole of all these coaches who wanted to do online and do videos of you swimming and do that. I'm like, I'm not about to pay all this money for some online consultation. So that's not going to work. So I went down this whole path on Saturday night trying to find a coach. I'm like, that's not going to work. Well, the next day was Sunday because that half Ironman was on a Saturday. I'm like, I'm going to the pool at 6 a.m. at LA Fitness and I'm swimming. I go to the pool, the same pool that I had been training in, and it was closed. They're like, this pool's about to be closed for a month. So I'm literally crying because it's like 20 in the morning. I'm like, the pool's closed. Like the only other LA Fitness was 40 minutes away. So I drove 40 minutes away to Kentucky. I was in Ohio. I drove 40 minutes away to Kentucky to LA Fitness. And I get in the pool. At this point, the gym had been open for like an hour and a half. It was still like 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday. And of course, I get in the water. It's only me and one other dude. And this guy's just cutting through the water like butter. He looks so good. He's crazy fit. He looks just incredible. And I noticed he had an IRONMAN water bottle outside the pool. And he's swimming just effortlessly, just killing it. And then he hops out the pool and I see the IRONMAN tat on his leg. And mind you, when I got to the pool that day, it was the day after the race. And I went from being 700 yards out, to really getting out, to struggling, to being in this pool. I could barely go 25 meters. Psychologically, my confidence had gone. It's like I lost all my skill. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. I was really struggling. I was like, oh my God, I can't even swim 50 meters right now. Like, what happened to me? I was traumatized. And I saw him kidding, and I just kept trying, and he saw me trying. And after the locker room, I just mustered up the confidence, and I just went over to him. I was like, hey, I saw that you're an Ironman. Like, I think that that's really cool. I want to be an Ironman. I got a DNF yesterday in the water, and I saw you were really good. Do you have any tips? And then he's like, dude, I got a DNF in my first Ironman in the water. I got the swim coach. His name is Joe. He's in Cincinnati. He owns a triathlon club. Me and Joe meet the next day. I start swimming lessons. I signed up for an Ironman the week later. The Ironman was 93 days later. I swam every single morning at 6 a.m. for 63 days straight. I skipped brushing my teeth. I skipped shaving. I skipped going to the bathroom. And when I first went to the pool, I couldn't swim. I was listening to Les Brown, Tony Robbins. I was listening to all these motivational speakers. Believe in yourself, self-esteem, overcome your fears, plus getting swim training, all that. From literally the Sunday going to the LA Fitness to meeting Dan Burnett, to Dan introducing me to Joe, starting swim lessons that same Monday. The rest is history. And I ended up finishing in the swim in that Ironman in the top 20% of all swimmers. But I crushed the swim, an hour and 23 minutes. My goal was an hour and 25 minutes. So 83 minutes, I swam 2.4 miles. And that was my first triathlon I ever finished, was a full Ironman, because I never finished the half. And everyone told me not to do it. All those guys that were there, everyone said, you need to take a couple years. You don't need to do it. I signed up for that Ironman in secret. And I didn't tell anyone that I signed up for it, no one that I signed up for it, until 30 days before the race, after I had drove down to Kentucky and rode the whole race and ran it in training. And after I rode that whole race and did the race, I came back and was like, yo, I'm signed up. I'm doing a full Ironman in a month. So, yeah, man.
Yeah.
This kind of goes back to passion, motivation, dedication. And you want to know what's funny? That whole time I was training for that Ironman, I was off social media. I wasn't texting people. I wasn't calling people. I disappeared. I made my post that Sunday about failure and saying I was going to bounce back. But my next post on anything was, I'm an Ironman. That was my next post. It's like, I'm an Ironman. I came back. I did it all, baby. I ate it. So like, and it's funny because while I was doing that, that's when I wanted to go to business school. The whole time I was training for that, I was thinking about my next thing. And it was that mental, it was the intellectual horsepower, it was the mental fortitude, it was that mind control that made me realize while I was doing the Ironman, you need to go to business school. And I remember saying, that is my next mountain. And I was literally telling people the whole day during that Ironman, because I was happy when I got out the water. I was like, race is over. I'm going to the best business school in the world. I'm going to Warren. I'm about to go. And this was 2016. I matriculated at Warren in 2021. And it's all I talked about on the course. When I crossed that finish line, I was like, I can do this stuff physically and mentally. It's time for me to put this level of energy and effort back into the book so I can propel my career, because I was having career success, but I knew that there was another level. And I knew that going to business school would be that next mountain. And I knew that though I graduated from Purdue with a decent GPA, I didn't apply myself I wasn't as competitive as I needed to be. So I would have to close that gap with lots of studying, lots of tutoring, math, reading, all that. Before I had gone down that path, before the Ironman, I never wore glasses. I literally got glasses so I could read better and I realized I needed glasses to improve my test scores. Mm-hmm. So this is all about, manifesting, overcoming adversity, bouncing back, having the confidence, and just being willing to change and adjust to reach your goal.
That's incredible. Incredible story.
I don't know if you knew that full story.
No, I didn't. There was a lot that I didn't know.
Man. Birds of a feather, though.
Yeah.
You gotta.
Yeah.
If I didn't drive from Cincinnati, if I just go home that Sunday morning and then just, go eat a bowl of cereal and watch Netflix, we might not know each other.
Yeah.
But it was that drive to Kentucky, that determination, and the courage to go talk to the dude.
Yeah.
Like, I failed yesterday. Have you ever been there? And him being like, yeah, I failed. Until this day, my training document that I have for Escape from Alcatraz, he built it. He built that Excel model.
Wow.
10 years later, I'm still using the same Excel model to track my workouts that Dan Burnett gave me. And he's a lifelong friend. So, yeah.
When you talk about passion and conviction, it also seems to be very aligned with by any means necessary. It's a passion that suffocates your insecurity, suffocates your pride, suffocates all those things that would otherwise prevent you from, asking for help, for example, as you mentioned, or, giving up after that first failure, that second failure. I mean, that's incredible. That's an incredible story.
But you had a similar story, am I not mistaken?
Man, yeah. The first DNF, man. The first race, being a DNF.
In the water?
In the water.
In the run?
Yep, in the water,
tough as a black man.
It is. I mean, and I didn't just feel like I let myself down. I felt like I let all of us down, bro. Because to your point, I mean, that race, same situation. I think this race was a bit smaller, maybe like 1,000 or 1,500 people. But in terms of black people, I could probably count them on one hand. This was in Michigan. You can count them on one hand. And I did not have a wetsuit, but it was wetsuit legal, cold water.
Ooh.
I was one of less than 10 people in the entire group that was not wearing a wetsuit. And the rest of the folks not wearing wetsuits were at the front because they were pros who were going to be in and out in 2 seconds. And so, yeah, man, it was a tough experience. I mean, you talk about resilience. I think getting out of the water. I mean, they were kind enough to let me go back to transition. That's foul that they made you sit and watch everybody. I mean, getting back out of the water. All I wanted to do was get out of there. Like, just my face was hot. Like, I felt like I felt like a failure. And my brother and I had driven up from Philly. I was in Philly at the time. He came to Philly, and both of us drove up to Michigan from Philly. So it was a long drive. And all I was thinking about was, I got up there and for what, And so we got back to the Airbnb. I remember just riding in silence back. And all I could think about was, what am I going to tell my family? What am I going to tell, again, all those people who knew I was doing this? Like, what is that story? And the more I thought about it, I got back to the place. I was quiet. I don't think I said 2 words to my brother. Straight up, I was just, hot. Like, I was in my head. I was upset with myself. And I got back to the place, and I remember thinking, man, I came here for stats. I'm about to get these stats. I'm about to figure out, I'm about to get the wisdom that I wanted from this race to propel me to the full Ironman. So I had a stretcher payment out back from my Airbnb, got on the bike, did the bike distance, came back, did the transition as if I were going through a transition.
What?
Did the run distance.
No.
Yeah, bro. When
I think you did tell me that this is crazy.
Yeah. I do remember. So
Goggins mode for
Bro, I was devastated. But there was like a 5-6 mile stretch of pavement out back, and so I was doing zigzags. But when I got on my bike and I left for the first out, I thought the trail just kept going, and the trail was interrupted by the Ironman race. I biked out and I had to stop and watch all those people biking in front of me who had finished the swim. Some folks were running, and I remember on the way back I stopped at a bench and I sat there and I cried for like 2 or 3 minutes, just like head in my hands, like I'm a failure. I felt like I had failed, but again, it was that
it's expensive too.
It's expensive.
It's expensive.
The gas money, the race cost, I mean, all of it.
The bike,
everything,
hotel,
man. Yeah.
Food,
All of it. And so I remember I sat there for a second feeling sorry for myself, and then immediately the light clicked back on again, like, get on the bike, dude. Like, why are you here? Figure it out. And so bike back, did those, did the laps, transitioned to the run. And I actually, for the run, I didn't do 13.1, I did 14.3 to make up for the 1.2 miles in this swim. I did it too. And so, yeah, man, I knew, because I knew that's how I wanted to come back. Was
that's
like,
I want it all. I won't leave a breadcrumb.
Exactly, exactly.
That's gold. Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's
man.
Crazy.
Yeah, man. And
you
so
covered the distance.
Yeah, covered the distance. Same day. Yeah. It's the first thing I did when I got back from the race.
That's different.
I knew how tough of a mental challenge it was going to be for me to bounce back if I didn't accomplish something out there, And you talk about the trauma in the water. First off, I had trauma in the water too afterwards. I was just like, it felt almost like I was starting from square one. Like, how could I, it was a struggle. I was worried about how much would I break down if I came back and just didn't try, And so, yeah, man, from that moment on, I think that for me was almost as impactful as finishing my first Ironman.
That is a beautiful story. That is crazy. I honestly haven't gone through that. I don't know how you did that. That is so you clearly, when you got back to Philly, you locked in.
Yeah.
You created a plan.
Yeah.
You executed your plan. You obviously became successful with it. But what was that?
Yeah.
What was the next couple of days after? Did you keep that momentum and just get right back in the pool? And obviously, it sounds like you had to overcome that mental part of it too.
Yeah.
A little bit of aggressive.
Yep. But yeah, absolutely that. The next day, I was back to training because I knew if I wasn't strong enough to hit the half Ironman swim and I had a full coming up, I had to be more than doubly prepared going into the next one. And so it was, and I can't remember exactly when we linked up to start working out, but it couldn't have been very long after that. Because that race was in September.
It was September.
Yeah.
It was 2 weeks later.
There you go.
It was at Rosie's.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Jordan introduced us. That's right. Shout out to Jay Wood, getting married. Yeah, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, vote for him in 2034.
Hey, absolutely. You won't regret it. You won't regret your vote.
Just manifested that.
Yeah, I love it. The senator.
Dude, when did you know you wanted to be an Ironman?
That was, and actually, this is a question that I had for you as well. The idea of signing up for Tough Races. I was trying to figure out the next challenge, and I think my story starts even further back in 2019. My manager at the time, I was out in LA. My manager at the time recommended I read "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins. He knew I was into autobiographies. He knew I was like this, intense sort of guy, and he said, "You'll really like this book. You should read it." And so read that book, and it changed the trajectory of my life.
You probably done more after reading that book. 9% of people on the planet. Marathons,
Marathons. Yeah. I mean, it literally changed. I mean, because what the book did for me was inspire me to challenge myself to do something I always told myself, not that I couldn't do it, but that it wasn't something that I should try to do because it wasn't my body type. Running. Like, I always told myself, like, I'm not a runner. Like, how I define myself is, you know, I lift, I do these other things, I play basketball, I do these other things. Like, I am not a runner, though. And I realized that telling myself I wasn't a runner was just limiting myself. And it was really probably born more from fear than anything else, or just, I don't really know exactly what caused it, but I also didn't have lots of runners around me, and it was never something that I like wanted to focus on. But what I did tell myself was, I'm not a runner. And reading that book and understanding that he was definitely not a runner, right? From where he started, he was like the antithesis of a runner at the time when he first started to run.
Right.
And seeing where he took that from, you know, starting there to becoming a Navy SEAL, ultra runner, all these things. You know, it inspired me to begin to challenge my view of myself, and what I could and couldn't do. And so began to run. I told myself I was going to run my first marathon in 6 months, under 6 months was the deadline I set.
That's crazy.
And
That's crazy.
that was in June, I believe, June of 2019. Ran my first marathon in November 2019. So I hit that goal. First half in September, and then first full in November. And after hitting that one, I told myself I was going to run 3 marathons. And so did that one, did LA in March, and then COVID hit. Literally the weekend before everything shut down for COVID was that LA marathon. And so ran the LA marathon, finished it. And so I had to wait for number 3 until they started doing events again. At least I wanted the medal too. So I had to wait for the organized events again. And so ran another marathon after COVID, after things began to open up. And after I hit that challenge, the question became, what's next? And it was really, what fear do I want to tackle? And my deepest fear at the time was open water. Very, very afraid of open water. And so I thought, how can I attack this fear with working out, challenging myself mentally and physically? And that's when the idea of an Ironman came. I thought, two plus miles swimming, 2.4? Absolutely not. And so that's when I decided it has to be this. And so that's where my journey started, was back in 2019, you know, fast forward and here we are. But interested in, because I've asked myself, I still actually kind of struggle with the question, because I do love the idea of signing up for the toughest races. And there was that passion that we've discussed in pursuit of the marathon and then the Ironman. And, you know, part of me doesn't know exactly what the next big challenge will be. Work is consuming and I love it and it's extremely challenging, but I want to also have that physical challenge. I don't know if you have physical challenges that you're running after, or if you have a philosophy around identifying that next challenge that you pursue.
Yeah, so for me, I would go back to the martial arts thing. I'm currently a red belt in Taekwondo and karate. And so I want to finish completing my the black belt process and system, which I was on a path just a few belts away before going to business school. Obviously moved to Philadelphia from Chicago, didn't have the same access to the same dojang, and, you know, the same network, and never really got back into that community because, you know, with the belt system, there's a certain process. You have to find a place. It's expensive as well. My Ironman that we did together at business school, that was an Ironman I had planned to do in California, but because of COVID, it got canceled. So I deferred it a couple of times to Lake Placid. So I'd already paid for it. But I wasn't necessarily trying to pay for the martial arts, you know, the classes and the dojo and stuff in business school. And then after business school, you know, moved to New York and started working. and haven't found a place yet. There are places in this neighborhood, in the community, but I do want to see that through. I thought about, not saving it or waiting with it. I would love to do it with my kids. Would love my kids to get into martial arts, and I thought that would be cool to get them back in it, because I've seen that in my martial arts journeys. I've seen, fathers with, grandparents with their son who's, a parent with their grandkids, all in the same dojo, all in the same, place through the belt system. I've seen it personally. My fiance has too, and going to all the, the martial arts testing. Like, before business school, I was 6 days a week doing martial arts. And I was doing at minimum a 30-minute class every day. And then also at minimum 30-minute class on my own, or like training there. So it was a very big part of my life, like martial arts. And so I do want to continue doing that. And maybe, it's jujitsu possibly, but I definitely want to finish the belt system in like karate and taekwondo. I don't know when it'll be, truthfully, just because things are crazy. Obviously, I'm doing the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon next weekend.
Huge.
It's a different situation because my company owns it. So I didn't have to go through the lottery to enter. I didn't have to pay for it. But I consider that a challenge.
Absolutely.
And then of course, getting married. So it's tough right now with work. I know we both work insane hours all the time. And it is hard to work so much and to have that challenge. So I don't know when the next race will be, but we'll do it together.
Yeah, hey, that's a promise. That's a promise.
Even if it's ultra, although that's a whole nother. You would have a comrade.
Yeah, hey, let's do it.
We're gonna have to do something.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Hard in the next couple years. I realize you can't go more than 2 years without.
100%. 100%. You talked about momentum. It has been extremely important for me, and it's almost I view it as a healthy fear, but it's always been in the back of my mind, this desire to never want to lose momentum. I think it's why I'm always looking for that next big challenge or the next big thing. I think once you have momentum, it's so easy to lose it via complacency, that it's so important to continue to challenge yourself. Can you talk about how you maintain momentum, but also for folks who don't yet have momentum or feel like they have momentum, maybe any tools or suggestions you would have to develop it?
I would say, it's the same way as you approach an Ironman. It's one step at a time. You build momentum by small little actions. And, I got a lot of times I say stuff and I hear other people said it to me, but I remember when I moved to Cincinnati for that office that they had recently acquired, there was a very, very successful man that was in the office, and I asked him, what is your keys to success? He said, daily work habits. And I remember writing that on the whiteboard in the office. I just wrote daily work habits. And then over time, I started to actually write down, okay, what are my daily work habits? To the point now where, look at my phone, daily work habits. He gave me these keys in 2015. What's this say? Wake up at 5 a.m., hydrate 17 ounces of water, meditate and shave, strength training at 5:45 a.m. And it goes on until bedtime at 11 p.m. So you build momentum from your daily work habits, from your small deposits. You just have to build momentum. You have to look at things small, and you have to celebrate the small things in your control. And then you have to recognize that you're doing everything in your power to get to something. It's not going to happen overnight. And that's the same way the Ironman is. You think 5 minutes at a time. Like, it's one step after another. David Goggins says it in I have a playlist. I got to send it to you, called Morning Glory. I have a playlist every morning that I listen to.
Please, yeah. 8
videos of the Michael Phelps, the Floyd Mayweathers, the David Goggins, John Jones, The Rock type of morning motivation. It's my favorite short 10-minute less content of theirs that I listen when I'm getting ready in the morning. And the thing is about momentum is you have to just what David Goggins says in one of those Morning Glory videos is, it said, all you have to do is just think about taking the next step. He's like, that's what I always ask myself. I don't know if I can take 2, but I know I can just take 1 more. Just take 1 step. If you know you can take one more step and you don't, that's failure. But if you can take one more and just take one more step. I think that's very, very important. The next one I say is just not being complacent. And honestly, I'm obsessed with momentum. I'm obsessed with moving forward. There was an executive at the company I started my career after Purdue at, and he always had a line, which I know, again, none of these people created these lines that they say, but I'm giving them credit because this is where I heard it. His name is Bill Zabel, big executive at Arthur J. Gallagher, or Gallagher now. And he said to me, shout out to Bill, he was good to me. But what he said, he used to always say, if you're not growing, you're dying. You're either growing or you're dying. And that hit me so hard. And I always have thought about that. Like, you have to keep moving forward. You have to, in your career, in your relationships, in your personal life, in your physical body. And it's always front and center for me. And it's not one thing. It's like, sometimes I get down on myself because it's like, man, a part of me is missing. I need to be practicing the piano. I need to create an album. There's part of me that, in different aspects of me, that I've had to starve or sacrifice for growth. But in the back of my mind, I've always thought about evolving. We have to continuously evolve. And that's what I love about Ironman. It's a next evolution.
Yeah.
That's what they say in like the SEALs training, like all those different things. You can't get overwhelmed by everything. You just have to keep taking a bite. You swim, you bike, and then you run. And people always ask at Ironman, what's your favorite part?
Yeah.
It's like the one I'm doing next.
Yeah.
You swim for 2.5 hours, you want to bike.
Yeah.
You bike for 6 hours, you want to run.
Yeah.
So momentum to me is just like a mindset of not being complacent and just realizing like time is moving forward. We have to progress. And I recently saw in a Netflix documentary that it was a Liver King documentary. One of the kids said that my dad always says that this Liver King's like, my dad always says that happiness is progress and progress is happiness. And I believe that. So I think that momentum is somewhat of is a part of your mentality. It's not something that necessarily it's subjective. It's a glass half full. And being able to look back on every day and being able to say like, hey, I won today. That is a part of creating momentum. But there is a dark side to it as well, which is that depression and that anxiety of never feeling like you hit a home run or knocked it out of the park. And I struggle with that. And I come home all the time from work after training. And some of the days where I work the hardest, I literally at the end of the day feel terrible. And I'm notorious after hard work, after steam room sauna, all that. Sometimes when I'm walking home from the gym after, a 14, 16-hour day, I'm just cussing. I'm just, I'm mad. And I'm honestly mad because I feel like inside, I just feel like I didn't do enough. I wasn't good enough. I didn't text enough people back. I wasn't proactive enough. I have that in the back of my mind that you have to keep going. It's that Ironman mentality. Keep going. It's never done. It's never finished. So it is a state of mind. You have to celebrate the small wins. You have to also recognize that you have to run your own race. That's one of the things that I love about Ironman and all the marathons that I've done. I've done 7 marathons. I did the Red Rock Canyon Marathon in Vegas. And just one quick small story on it. One thing that I love about Ironman is you learn to run your own race. You can't look at everybody else and how fast they are, or what they look like, and compare it, because that same person who flies past you a few hours later could be on the side of the road, hurt, injured, burned out, not got nutrition. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a race, and then if somebody zooms past the nutrition spot, and you're like, hey, I'm going to stop, and then you find that you passed them up later because they didn't get the fuel that they needed, right? So that Red Rock Canyon Marathon with all the elevation, I remember it was about 300 people who did the race. Very, very difficult race in the mountains, crazy elevation. The first 5 miles are just a straight up climb uphill. And I tell this story to everyone when I talk about this marathon, but I started in the very back, unlike I was an Ironman when I did this race, so I had a different mentality. I started all the way in the back. There was 300 people. I started so far back that the 2 people who were next to me was a man and a woman who were walking the marathon who had on Jesus sandals. No cap. They had thong sandals on. And that they were the ones that's how slow I was running. Dude, I ended up dropping more than half the race. I finished in like 109 out of 300. But I started the race in the very, very back. So the moral of the story is I was moving very, very slowly, but with the right mentality, with that Ironman mentality, progress is happiness. And if you stop looking at what everyone else is doing and you just focus on running your race, staying in your lane, keeping things in perspective, keeping a positive attitude, you will move forward. And even with the stress and the anxiety and the pressure that I feel to always be producing, always have a deliverable, I come home every single day from work and I tell them, I want to make money. I want to make the company, I want to make the company money. Like, I want to win. I want to close deals. I want to be successful. I don't give a damn if I work on a deal for months. If it doesn't close, I'm not satisfied. I don't care how good the work product is. If we didn't get the score, if you didn't score points, you feel empty. Yeah. Even though you had all those learning. So it can be toxic, and it can be, mental health is real. And knowing how to like keep things in perspective is important. So you need a partner, and you need friends to be like, yo, you're killing it. You're learning. This is wisdom. This is the long game. This is a marathon. This is an Ironman. Because it's easy day to day to be so obsessed with deliverables. When in the grand scheme of things, it's like we're on a path. So to me, I think that, again, momentum is a mindset, and it's about just taking the small steps and celebrating the small steps and keeping things in perspective and saying, look at how far we've come. Look at how far we've come. Because, again, day to day, when you put that pressure on yourself to always be growing, it's easy to be, mad. Mm-hmm. But then you have to take a step back and be like, whoa, I've done a lot in this past month or week. Yeah. But you can't be complacent either.
So important to measure based on distance traveled as opposed to, and I think about that a lot with races. I mean, it's the same concept, right? Like, you don't know, well, even better example, and I realized this once I started training, like running on my own to train. Sometimes I'd be out, seeing folks running out of breath, struggling, and I think to the inexperienced runner or to the untrained eye, you would see that person and think, man, that person's struggling. Like, are they a runner? They haven't been doing much. But the perspective that I gained after having trained is you have no idea what mile they're on. Woo! They could be on mile 19. They could be on mile 20. And yeah, they look like they're struggling, but
that's
you're right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you have no idea.
That's so real.
The distance that people have traveled. And so, I think it's important, as you said, to also pour back into yourself with that same idea, which is you got to acknowledge distance traveled too.
That is so powerful.
Yeah, and I think we talk about, race in races, like the fact that there's very little representation. I mean, I would take it a step further and think about the distance you have to travel to end up in similar spaces with other folks, in work, in, lots of other things. And it's not even just race-based. It could be socioeconomic. It could be whatever it is, right? Like, the person, and whenever we think about hiring, me and my business partner think about hiring, we always...
Talk, Ron.
Hey,
this man's creating jobs.
I mean, we always talk about the fact that we look for folks who are from small towns, who go to, it doesn't even have to be, the Ivy League school. It can be, a good school, strong GPA. But what we found is that usually folks who come from small towns, especially folks who have interesting stories about growing up and experiencing hardship, is that they did 10 times the work to get to that same place of, the kid who's, been set up his whole life and been put into the school, or, it's much more about, and Reggie, my business partner, talks about the second derivative of speed, which is acceleration, or the second, basically, it's the derivative of speed, which is acceleration. The fact that just because both of those folks are going 60 miles an hour, one person may have started from 40 and now he's going 60. The other person may have started from 0 and now she's going 60. Guarantee you those 60s are not the same, because the woman who is able to go from 0 to 60 and catch up with that person is going to 120.
Woo,
you know? And so that's the person that we're looking for.
No one talks about that, man.
Yeah.
No one and it's so easy to get lost in that. And man, everything that you said, I could not agree more with. And I think about that a lot. And I honestly say this, and I don't mean this to say this, but I don't know a single person other than arguably my older brother or one of my siblings. But honestly, I feel like we've had very different paths. I don't really, in the ways that I personally feel like I've grown, I don't really know anyone who's covered the distance that I have in so many different areas of my growth and development. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I see a lot of people cover ground in certain things, but very rarely do people cover ground in so many things that they weren't ever good at. You know, there's not a lot of grown men teaching themselves how to play an instrument. Or learn a new language, or take on new skills, or learn how to swim, or you know what I mean? Like, that is the biggest testament to who someone is and where they're going. And I think about that all the time. Like, even at my job right now, I love it, but you know, those people that I go to work with, they don't understand how far that I've come. You know, and I say that to my boss all the time. Shout out to Paul K, president of all locations. Big up. Gotta plug him. I love you, Paul. But no joke. Like, I always say to him, I'm like, I was not always this guy. You know, people always say, oh, you're so nice. You're so nice. It's like, but I've been very mean. Like, I know how to be nasty. I know how to be a bully's bully. You don't want to see that side of me, but I've grown. I've evolved. Not a lot of people cover that much ground in their life. And I remember this one time I was in Chicago and I was chasing after this one taxi, and I got there at the same time as this executive did. And we were both about to get in the taxi at the same time. And then he said to me, he was like, oh, let's just share it. Where are you going? Let's just share it. Let's just share it. And so I was like, okay, great. Let's do it. So we ended up sharing this taxi together. And he ends up being the CEO of, like, I forgot the name of the company, but it'd literally be the equivalent of like Monsanto. Like, he was a big time CEO. And I'm this young black kid. He's an older white man. And he said to me, he was like, look, you know, he got my name at the time. He's like, Topher, you know, one thing that my father taught me, and I come from a very fortunate family, you know, very successful family. He's like, everyone is born on the hill. Their only question is, what do they do with it? It doesn't matter if you start here and it's somebody start here. What really matters in life is how far up that hill do you go, or how far down do you go. No matter where you're born on that hill, your job is to take it up as far as you can, so your kids and your loved ones can take it further. That's your only goal. Everything else doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if somebody starts up here and you start here. Your job is to continue to go up. Because guess what? Some people don't go up. And I can't even remember this man's name, and like, that always stuck with me. It's like, everyone is born on a hill, and your job is to see how far up that hill you can go, so the people after you can go up further from where you started. And you know, that just goes back to what you're saying about that distance travel and that acceleration. And man, I'm glad we had this talk, because I feel better about my life. It's easy to forget. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to look out this window. You know what I mean? Like, we're here, man. We've achieved, we've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. Like, talking about some 3 marathons in a year. Like, from the moment from 2019 now to do multiple Ironmans, to do an ultra marathon, like, this is not normal. You know, like, people literally swim their whole lives and sign up for an Ironman at 40. Being collegiate swimmers. You know, like, saying, oh, I read this book and 6 months later I'm running a marathon. That's crazy. One of my best friends ran track at Purdue, ran the 400, 800. He just ran his first marathon this year. 35 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like, I appreciate that. Put this in perspective, man, because it's easy to you know, not feel satisfied.
Really, really appreciate the time, the thoughts, and the words, man. Thank you.